Okay, so hello everyone and welcome to this exchange. The title of this exchange is Managing Supplier Risk Through Sustainability and will last approximately 30 to 45 minutes worth of content with a chance to ask questions at the end. Thank you for registering, and also thank you to Professor Andrew Douglas from the University of West England, who is our speaker today. My name's Emma and I'm the Member Events and Communities Officer here at the EAUC. As you know, the EAUC delivered a sustainability exchange, which was initially funded project by HEFKI and led by Staffordshire University. So what are exchanges? Exchanges are free lunchtime webinars on a range of sustainability topics. Anyone can present them. So if you want to have a go or have an idea, just get in touch with us at sustainabilityexchange@eauc.org.uk or drop a note to myself. Just a little bit of housekeeping to go over now. I'm hoping that everyone can hear okay. I have muted you all just to avoid background noise so that you can hear as clearly as possible. If you have any issues hearing at any point during this exchange, could you please use the chat box to send me a message saying so, and I'll try and figure it out. Hopefully most of you have working microphones. Don't worry if you don't, as you'll still be able to have the chance to ask any questions at the end by typing them to me in the chat box, and I'll read them aloud to our speaker, Andrew. This webinar is being recorded so that you can view it again or share it with colleagues. It will be made available on the Sustainability Exchange with the presentation and any other resources a few hours after this exchange has ended. You'll also be sent a short survey to gain your feedback. Please take the time to complete this as it's valuable to both the EAUC and to you. Okay, that's all from me now. Thank you, and we're over to
Thank you, Emma. Thank you to you and the EAUC for the opportunity to present this webinar today. And particularly thank you to everyone who's taken the trouble to join out of your busy days and your lunch hour. So, as you can see, my name's Andrew Douglas. I'm from Bristol Business School. My mitigating circumstance is that I used to do a real job. I used to head up procurement for Honeywell and for Oracle across Europe. Before lapsing into the world of academia. So what I want to do today is to take you through the SIP Sustainability Index, where it fits in and where we think it adds some value. And I will certainly keep to the time. So just to set the scene, supplier risk. Supplier risk is typically operational, financial, reputational. Sometimes one kicks into the others. If you get a reputational risk from a supplier, it can affect you or your organization financially and maybe even operationally, and vice versa. And when we started to look at sustainability, which was about 3 years ago, there were several things that struck us immediately. Firstly, buyers were asking the same questions to their supply base, often the same suppliers, on a frequent basis. And suppliers were struggling, to answer the questions because some of them weren't relevant to them. And also it took up an awful lot of their time continually answering questions. And from a buyer perspective, they find it very difficult once they got the answers to actually make a judgment or a score on them. So we've tried to do something here which takes a lot of the inefficiency out whilst providing an accurate way of understanding an organization's sustainability credentials, as we call it. So that's exactly it, and the challenges. So let me take you through the CSI. So what we're doing here is we're looking at the 3 pillars of sustainability: economic, social, and environmental. And it provides both the buyer and the supplier with a view of their sustainability credentials, of the supplier sustainability credentials, from an organizational perspective, and I keep stressing that. This isn't for a supplier's products or services, it's for their organization. And you'll see as we go through towards the end of the presentation that there are significant benchmarking opportunities for both buyers and suppliers, which will help them understand things that they could do better and things that they're doing rather well. So who put this together? This is led by SIPS, and hopefully you all know SIPS. They're currently the largest purchasing institute in the world, 65,000 members and growing. In fact, they've added 20,000 in China now, so they're an 80-odd thousand. UE to do the academic underpinning, and of course universities and professional institutes don't actually necessarily deliver most of the things, so we needed a commercial partner, and we chose somebody you've probably never heard of called PRGX. And that was quite deliberate, that we wanted somebody who wasn't in what I would call the sustainability game. Because we did quite a bit of research on sustainability indexes around the world and what made good ones and what, and indices in general, quite frankly, pricing indices. What made good ones and what didn't. And we found that having an index that really was a vehicle to primarily sell consultancy is not a good idea. PRGX are actually a leader in audit recovery, so they are in a leader in data management, data mining, and producing the software that supports that. So that's where they've fitted in. And we've got two other groups of folks, knowledge partners and industry mentors, and I'll just talk about those two in the next two slides. Our industry mentors were the group that came together specifically to help guide us, read the question sets, read the way that we've been going about it, the commercial proposition, and everything around the index as it was built, to make sure that it was fit for purpose. And the purpose that we're looking for is something that fits all industry sectors and all sizes of suppliers. So you can see on the names here, you've got folks like BP, Heathrow Airport, you've got Department of Education, Work and Pensions. We have the MOD, but you can't use their logo as nobody can. And of course, a number of universities. So you can see there UE, which you'd expect, Reading, Brunel, Exeter, other folks like Centrica, Office Depot. So a very good mix of organisations from different sectors across the UK. We also have a number of knowledge partners. Now these are the ones that are either former knowledge partners or going through the process right now. Carbon Trust. Carbon Trust is interesting because we also set out from the outset that, for example, if a supplier has a Carbon Trust rating, then we would detect that within our profile questions, as we call them, and avoid asking them any questions related to that. They would get marked based on their Carbon Trust rating. And we're quite open. We would do that with any supplier of any rating that they have, providing whoever gave them the rating is prepared at least to help us understand what it was so we could cross-refer it. So you can see quite a group of people here who've been helping, what I would say is add a sort of sanity check of what we're doing in their specialist areas to make sure that it's something that they would, as you can see, put their name to. So the academic underpinning we spent the best part of a year understanding what buyers particularly were asking of suppliers, what came under each of the three pillars. As I say, we looked at 135 indices around the world. The vast majority were either looking at one strand, i.e. one strand of environmental, might just be looking at energy or carbon. They also were ones that were inside an organization's firewall, like the Walmart Sustainability Index or the Philips Sustainability Index. And quite a lot of those were actually tick boxes that never saw the light of day outside of that organization. We also put each of the factors or elements that came under these into what we call clusters. And you'll see that's quite important going through because it's the vehicle that we use to provide feedback and benchmarking to buyers and suppliers. So here are the clusters, just to give you some guidance. The economic ones, you can read those, split into 4 categories. The social ones, again, 5 categories there, ones that you probably expect to see. And then the environmental ones, again, ones that you'd expect to see, the classic ones of greenhouse gas, energy, wastewater. But also sustainable sourcing and material and resource use as well. So here's how what we call the product, here's how the index works. A supplier goes in and provides their basic information, which is checked. So, and we've got a team of auditors behind this. So when they put their basic information into register, their name, their address, their registration number, whatever it happened to be, that is checked to make sure it's valid, they're not already on the register, etc., etc. We also have a number of profile questions that help us determine which of the bank of questions that we've developed the supplier gets. And this is quite important. So I always say the solicitor in Barnstable would only get potentially 30 questions, where BP would get 59 across the piece. The questions would be specific, detailed specific to the size of supplier, the sector they're in, where they source around the world, etc., etc. And there's also a fee. This is, as you'll see a bit later, a supplier pays model, but it's actually not a lot of money, and that was one of the aims of it. And then from that, from our maximum number of 59 questions, which is 59 total across the 3 pillars, the supplier provides not only an answer, they provide supporting evidence. That supporting evidence is then validated by our team of assessors who have been trained, usually in one of the pillars, some across all 3 pillars. And there's a scoring. Usually for each question it's scored between 0 and 4, and so suppliers who are not as per the best practice examples that the assessors have, but getting there, they would get a score somewhere in between. And we've worked hard to provide consistency of scoring across it. As you expect with all the software, suppliers can go in, they can print out the questions, they can upload URLs, they can do all the sorts of things you want. They can stop and go back and save and do all those things. The supplier scores are calculated and they're published, with a score for each pillar. We don't add all the 3 scores together to produce a master CSI score, because I've yet to find anybody who could agree on the weighting that they would put to each pillar. So buying organizations can do that at their leisure. And then it's published to the supplier. They've got typically 5 days if they want to raise any questions about their score, and then it's actually published into the index and the buyers who care about that particular supplier. The way it works from a points perspective is that, say, a supplier in one pillar might get 10 questions, maybe the solicitor gets 10 questions, their CSI score would be a percentage of the total marks that they got against the total marks that they could have got out of those 10 questions. Where, say, BP would have got 20 questions in that pillar, it's the same logic, but of course they would have had the opportunity to attain more marks out of a much higher total number of marks. Therefore, we can have at least some consistency in comparing across sizes of organizations as well. So how does it fit? This is a common question. The question that often goes with this is, how does it fit with EU procurement laws and policies, etc.? And the reality is, you do not use this as a pre-qualification tool. You do not use this in your tender process. I always think a bit morally wrong to ask 10 suppliers who you are asking to bid or want to bid for your work to go and pay money to get a score here, there, or anywhere, and you're only going to use one of them. That's not what it's for. What we advise is, if you're minded to do so, you would put into your tender that the winning supplier would be expected to get a CSI rating within a number of days, weeks, or months, because this is all about understanding the supplier sustainability credentials of suppliers you currently have and expect to continue to have a commercial relationship with. Looking at the pyramid here, for some organizations, they have in their buying team, they have a whole range of category managers or supplier relationship managers, they're sometimes called, and they would hopefully be doing and asking all the questions that we're asking and more. So we expected that those suppliers wouldn't be ones on a buying organization's list for a CSI rating. As it happens, the vast majority of participating buying organizations to date have included all their supply base. For those 3 slices at the top, what they don't include, quite rightly, are the one-time buys from suppliers who they're most unlikely to use again. And it's particularly, and often very low value ones as well, or low volume stroke value. The commercial proposition, As I say, it's a supplier pay model with a maximum of 799 for the BPs of this world and 299 for the smallest suppliers. We've not had any suppliers gripe about the cost, and that's because they get a significant amount of consultancy out of it as well, as you'll see in a minute. It is free for all participating buying organizations, and we use the word participating in that it's what we don't want are voyeurs, if you like, who just want to come in, get scores of suppliers that they care about without adding something to it. And the adding something to it is saying, well, here's a group of suppliers that we want to work with you to get CSI ratings. And when we have no requirement in terms of number, that could be 5, 10, 15, 20, or 500, or 1,000, or whatever, is appropriate for that organization. That's the only thing we ask. So what about the smaller suppliers? Because, as I said earlier, this is something we really wanted to be appropriate for all sizes of suppliers, as well as all business sectors. What we've done is this: A, the minimum cost. And the typical answer from suppliers is, this is really cheap consultancy. And if it stops buyers taking an awful lot of my time up, asking the same questions, wow, it's a very good deal. What we also developed, as well as the allocation matrix that I talked about, so SMEs only get the relevant questions, is firstly help text. Each question has help text that you'd expect to help explain the question and the thought behind it. We quickly understood that the text for a larger organization is not the same as a text for an SME. So we've got two sets of help text, and the SMEs that we pick up, of course, from the profile questions at the start would get wording that's much more appropriate to their business type. And the same for suppliers when they are identified as being in the lowest quartile of a cluster, so there's where those clusters come in again, within a pillar. They get a whole load of how to improve information, and I'll show you some examples of that in a minute. Again, we wrote those for SMEs different to how the wording for larger organizations, and that seems to go down quite well. So how do buyers manage their risk using this? The best way to show you that is some of the dashboards they get. So here's a dashboard which a buyer would get, where they're saying, okay, I am going to set thresholds for my organization. As you can see here, an organization has set thresholds of 56, 65, and 70 across the three pillars. And below are the suppliers who have not exceeded that threshold. Now, of course, to start with, the threshold is a bit trial and error. You might put thresholds in and no suppliers come up, or all your suppliers come up. But you'll see, going as I go further on, there are ways to help you guide you as to what might be an appropriate threshold for your organization. And we think over time, of course, buying organizations will raise their thresholds as their suppliers move up in their scoring. On the next one, here am I as a category buyer or a commodity buyer, and I care about food and beverage processing. So here are the threshold scores that I've set. And I may well have set this because, as you'll see a bit later, I know what the average score is for food and beverage processing suppliers. So I've got an idea of what I would expect my suppliers to get. I might even compare my suppliers with other suppliers in our organization. Or I may just be given the threshold by my boss, one way or the other. So here you can see they set a threshold, and two of their suppliers have actually come below it, just below in terms of environmental for the first one, but they're all, the second one is pretty much off the pace in all three. Next one a buyer might get is to say, okay, now I'm going to look at categories. So here's a category of facilities management. And you can see on the four options to the left, I can compare my suppliers, my facilities management suppliers, with all my suppliers. So all the suppliers that I, as a buyer, follow, care about, have tagged in the CSI that they're my suppliers, because that's how a buyer can do it. all suppliers in the same sector. So these are all suppliers in facilities management within the CSI. Or suppliers in my organization, so every supplier that my organization follows as a whole. Or in this case, what you're seeing is facilities management suppliers compared to all suppliers in the CSI, because that's the tab they've chosen. And you can see their suppliers are below average in every case. So I've worked out I may or may not have an issue with some of my suppliers. So let me delve into a bit more detail. Here's a supplier, ABC Corporation. And here are where they are. And remember, here are the clusters. And here are where they are doing well. So they are not in the bottom quartile. And that's the green ticks. Or they are in the bottom quartile, which is the question marks. And so as a buying organization, you would look and say, okay, do I care that my supplier seems to be in the bottom quartile on business integrity and ethics? Well, you probably would. And it probably goes for some others as well. And then I could look at one supplier and I could benchmark them again. I could benchmark them again, the 4 tabs on the left. Similar in size to my supplier. So all suppliers who have the same number of employees in the employee range as ABC Corporation. Similar in size to my supplier's business sector, to the supplier's customer sector. So where the supplier is supplying, which may well include myself. That customer sector may have a different aspiration in terms of CSI scores than the supplier sector. And again, all companies in the CSI. So now what does that, that's just a snapshot of some of the things a buyer gets to understand if they've got a potential risk with a supplier. So what does a supplier get? So they get a scorecard like this. So here's ABC's scorecard across the 3 pillars, and you can see it's pretty grim. They're doing well in nothing, in the economic, in waste management, on the environmental, and nothing in the social. And they need to improve in these are, you see the list below there, those particular clusters where they're in the lowest quartile. So that gives them an overall scorecard. You can see then export it to PDF. They can give it to their boss or whoever to try and generate some interest in the organization to do better. So this one here shows, okay, I've clicked on the economic tab. Now it's starting to give me some guidance. I'm not doing well in corporate governance. Here are some bullet point things that I am being told that I could be doing that would help improve. Below the bullet points, you'll see Add View Plan. And this is where a supplier can put in at any point in time their actions that they're taking to get better in this particular area. Buyers can also view that. So if you've got a supplier you care about and you care that they're not doing well in corporate governance, you'll be able to go and see things that they're now saying they're doing to get better. There's also View Full Advice. The full advice for corporate governance is several pages. It gives them a lot more detail. It gives them some best practice examples. It gives them access to various sources of knowledge that we have both in the CSI and links through the CSI to other websites. So here I'm benchmarking myself against in terms of my clusters. So here's my cluster performance, and this is my comparing my score with the average score of other companies in my sector, and I'm not doing well. And that's probably one of the most powerful reports that a supplier gets, because this is really where buyers can also benchmark me against my competitors effectively, and so where I need to be potentially improving. And here's a sample benchmark that they can do. So as you can see, They're comparing suppliers of a similar size. They can do suppliers in their sector, in their customer sector, and all suppliers in CSI too. So this is similar to, in fact, it's the same report that a buyer would see for that particular organization. We also have what we call financial alerts. You may have seen in the clusters there is the financial cluster. This, classically, for a purchasing organization, what would fit in there would, a buyer would often ask for suppliers' accounts. Now, in my experience, most buyers are certainly not trained to be able to analyze company accounts to the extent where they know whether that supplier is going up or going down in the world. But by asking for it and getting it and ticking a box often makes them feel happy, but doesn't help them. So we have teamed up with Experian. Experian provide us their commercial Delphi score, which takes about 20 things into account. It takes the classic profitability, return on capital employed, financial measures, a number of those. It takes into account the time that organizations are paying their suppliers and whether that's changed. It takes into account whether that supplier has had financial judgments against them, from county court for the small ones or even the larger ones to other more serious judgments. And so that we convert into a CSI score for that cluster. We also have the ability to provide financial alerts. So for suppliers that you care about as a buyer, you can get an alert if their financial cluster score drops by 20%. And that's in real time. It's actually a daily basis. So that will give you a clue, hopefully, or one of several clues from the benchmarking that I've shown you, that a supplier may well be, A, getting a bit financially less stable, and B, might just be minded to do something inappropriate, or more minded to do something inappropriate. The most obvious example of that, of course, is the horse meat thing, where buyers put pressure on suppliers to reduce cost, and the suppliers, in reducing cost, get more squeezed, and so they go and buy horse meat from Romania to keep their margins and keep themselves afloat. Lucky it wasn't a squirrel, is all I always think. But just an example of how a financial alert might give you as a buyer the ability to put in place a contingency plan. Buyers these days are being asked to do a lot more than just buy things. They're being asked to manage the suppliers and manage the risks to their organization. This is just one example of how you can do that. So, what are the uniques? Question I often asked. A, it's independent. It's produced by SIPS for the UK pricing profession. And there is nothing like that in the world, quite frankly. Underpinned by sound academic research. Well, of course, we would say that, but we think that's probably true. We've got the industry mentors from the public and private sector working together. We've got the positions and pillar by cluster. And I sort of labour this in supporting the smallest, the largest organisation, and the ones that we've seen go through and get scores to date. It's been quite interesting how well they've adapted to the questions and answered the questions. In some cases, you can tell that suppliers didn't have a policy on equal opportunity yesterday. They have one today because not only have they uploaded their policy, it's got today's date on it. It's a bit daft, but actually we don't mind, because if by getting a CSI rating it's caused an organization to have a policy on something which we deem they probably should have had, that they didn't have yesterday, then it's doing some good. And actually almost all the buyers that we speak to take that view. So the other thing is all industry sectors, and we think that's quite important too. So how's it been going? Well, it's been going for about 6 months now. We've got over 100 buying organizations registered and at different stages of becoming active. We've got 25,000 suppliers nominated by the more active of those buyers to date for the ones that they want to get a CSI rating. The universities, as you can see, Bath, Oxford, Cambridge, Exeter and UWE are very active ones. And we're going through their supplier onboarding process as I speak. We're seeing at least a 23% shared supplier rate. In fact, it's higher than that across universities. But we're also seeing that shared rate across organizations like universities, vehicle manufacturers, financial institutions, banks, utilities, etc., etc. And retailers. So we think that's was one of the premise for this, that we know there's a lot of duplication of suppliers. There has to be across the UK. It's just logical. And by doing this, organizations are saying, here's a list of the 500 suppliers that we care about, and we're finding 100 of them are already in process. And that figure will grow as we go forward. And there we have it in 30 minutes, as promised.
Hi Andrew, it's Emma from EAC. That was brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm sure everyone agreed that was very insightful. If anyone does have any questions, just pop them in the chat box to me. If you haven't got the chat box open, just hover over the tab at the top of your screen and you'll find it there. I have had a couple of questions come in.
Sure.
If you don't mind me asking. The first one is, if someone is interested in learning more about becoming a participating buying organisation, what should they do?
Okay, well, what organisations tend to do, first of all, is to drop me an email saying, here, I'd like to know more. And either we'll talk to a wider group of their organisation, can do a webinar, which we can organise, or talk in more detail. The other thing that is quite typical is they say, okay, let me send you X number of our suppliers, either our complete supplier list, even just the supplier names is enough, quite frankly. And the CSI team will run that through against the suppliers that we already know about, that are in process, and be able to give you some understanding of how many of your suppliers are already en route to getting a CSI rating. And that actually can generally provide some comfort and interest going forward. We recently did it for the Uniproc, which you probably know are the research universities, 5 research universities, Oxford, Cambridge, University of London, and 2 others, I'm sorry, I can't remember, are the ones that they have collective agreements on, and I think we had a 69% match. The suppliers there that are already in the process, just as an example. So yeah, please drop me a mail if you're interested, want to know any more, want to know the next steps. The other thing I think to probably stress is that this is not a lot of work for you. The CSI team provide onboarding facilities, they follow up with the suppliers, etc., all free of charge. So that's quite important. This can be a fairly low-touch thing for buying organisations. The thing we do stress is the initial approach to the supplier is much better coming from the buyer who has a commercial relationship with them. But that can be done and can be helped to be done in a number of ways. For example, Exeter set up an email address for the CSI team to be able to send out emails on their behalf, having agreed the letter. So lots of ways of doing it.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Another question that's just come in, Andrew, is does the CSI team help with the supplier onboarding process? Yeah,
in some respect, that's probably just what I tried to answer. Yes, very much so. It's a process of, first of all, agreeing the letter that goes out to the supplier, which is usually an email. Before that, from having decided, say an organisation says, here's 500 suppliers that we really care about. The CSI team will net that against the group the suppliers already going through. And say, okay, from your 500, there are now 400 that we think you should communicate to ask to get a CSI rating. there's a series of template letters, and so but buyer can write their own letter or email, if you like. So then you need to find out who the account manager or right person is in those suppliers to send that to. Quite an important step. The CSI team will find all those individuals out where the buying organisation doesn't know it. The reality to date is, except for one organisation, most buying organisations know about 10% at most of who their account managers are. When you're looking at a list of 500 suppliers, they may well know the account managers for the top 10 or 20, but not for the top 500. So the CSI team will find that out, set up the email template for them, and then either the buyers can send it out, or, as I say, there are various ways of being able to do that and save the buyer time. And then there's a follow-up email process that goes after about 2 weeks if they've not done anything, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, the team are fully engaged, fully involved, and take all of the effort out of this.
Okay, brilliant. I don't think we actually have any more questions coming in at this moment. But as everyone can see, Andrew has kindly left his email address up on the screen there, so I'm sure you wouldn't have any objections with anyone dropping you an email.
No. Any questions that occur to you now or later, or if you've got anybody in your organisation that you think would benefit from a chat, more than happy to do that.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, I think we'll end it there then. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you very much.